Did you know that the tax authorities have just begun audits that could end in tragedy for thousands of Poles? If you purchased and installed an air conditioner with a heating function or a heat pump in recent years and deducted these expenses under the thermal modernization tax relief, the tax office could now demand a refund of up to 16,960 PLN. Yes, money you received legally could now become a debt to the state. How is it possible that something that was once permitted has now become a mistake? And why are even people who received positive tax rulings now receiving payment demands? Listen carefully, because what's happening now could affect you too. In Poland, more and more people are choosing to modernize their homes to reduce their energy and heating bills. Heat pumps, modern air conditioners with a heating function, photovoltaics, all of these were intended to save money and be environmentally friendly. That's why the government introduced the thermal modernization tax relief, which allowed for a tax deduction for expenses incurred on such investments. For many Poles, this was a great opportunity to save even tens of thousands of zloty. But today, in 2025, it turns out that the same people who trusted state regulations are being asked by the National Revenue Administration to refund their money. Homeowners who installed air conditioners with a heating function, effectively air-to-air heat pumps, are receiving letters from the tax office informing them that the deduction made several years ago was illegal. This means they must pay additional tax, which was previously reduced by this tax credit. In some cases, this amount can reach as much as PLN 16,960, and if the thermal modernization was carried out jointly with a spouse, the refund can exceed PLN 33,000. This is a shock for many people. After all, the thermal modernization tax credit was clearly described in the regulations. It applied to owners of single-family homes who invest in energy efficiency improvements. It seemed logical, then, that an air conditioner with a heating function, which actually heats a home and reduces energy consumption, should qualify for the deduction. In 2021, many taxpayers received confirmation of this interpretation in the form of official letters from the National Tax Information Office. Everything was done legally. But a few years later, in 2025, the situation changed dramatically. The Minister of Investment and Development clarified the regulation, specifying that air conditioners with a heating function are not covered by the thermal modernization tax relief. And although these changes only came into effect on January 1, 2025, the tax office concluded that such devices were not eligible for the relief even before that date. The result? The head of the National Tax Administration has initiated the process of amending the previous individual tax rulings, the same ones that previously protected taxpayers. In practice, this means that even if you obtained an interpretation confirming your entitlement to the tax relief several years ago, that interpretation may now be invalidated. The head of the National Tax Administration, KAS, has the authority to do so under Article 14E of the Tax Ordinance, which allows for the ex officio amendment of an interpretation if it is deemed incorrect. This option has now been exercised. In decisions issued in September 2025, the KAS explicitly stated that expenses for the purchase and installation of an air conditioner with a heating function, even if it has a built-in heat pump, do not meet the definition of a thermal modernization project. But that's not all. The tax office found that such expenses should never have been deductible, even under the law before 2025. According to the KAS, the 2018 regulation contained a closed list of materials and devices that could be deducted. The air conditioner with a heating function was not included in this list, so, according to officials, the taxpayers made a mistake in claiming the tax relief. The problem is that back then, a few years earlier, individual tax rulings confirmed something completely different. Today, thousands of people who acted in good faith may find themselves in a dire situation. Tax offices are sending out tax refund notices. Some letters contain specific amounts, even tens of thousands of zloty, that must be repaid within a short period of time. For many retirees, families with loans, and those who invested their savings in modern heating systems, this is a financial disaster. Worse still, not every taxpayer is protected by an advance ruling. This protection only applies if the ruling was delivered before the relief was applied, meaning before the taxpayer actually made the deduction on their tax return. If the ruling arrived after the return was filed, it does not provide full protection. In such a situation, the tax office can demand a refund of the relief, although the taxpayer is still protected from interest and fiscal penalties. However, the tax itself must be repaid. Imagine that in 2021 you bought an air conditioner with a heating function, paid several thousand zloty, applied for an interpretation, and only received a positive response a few months later. In the meantime, you had already filed your personal income tax return, taking advantage of the tax relief. And now, 4 years later, you receive a letter from the National Revenue Administration, KAS, stating that the interpretation had been changed, and you must repay PLN 16,960. Not because you defrauded the office, but because the government changed its mind. For many experts, this action raises serious doubts. Can the government reverse its decisions retroactively? Should a taxpayer who acted in good faith bear the consequences of an official's misinterpretation? From a legal perspective, unfortunately, yes. The head of the KAS has the right to change the interpretation, and the tax office can demand a tax refund. For citizens, this means one thing: even if something was permitted yesterday, it may become a reason for payment today. Many Poles are therefore starting to ask, what about trust in the government? Can investments be planned when regulations and their interpretations are changed retroactively? This is especially true since the thermal modernization tax relief was one of the key instruments supporting eco-friendly solutions in homes. Now it turns out that even such a green investment as a heat pump can backfire on the owner. Tax experts urge people who took advantage of the tax relief for an air conditioner with a heating function to review their documents as soon as possible. If you have an individual tax ruling issued before claiming the deduction, you're safe. However, if the ruling arrives later, the tax office may demand additional payment. It's also worth preparing for possible contact with the tax office, and don't ignore letters from the National Tax Administration, KAS. Importantly, if you receive a demand for a refund, you don't have to pay the money immediately. In many cases, you can apply for installment payment or a deferred payment. It's also worth consulting a tax advisor, who will help you assess whether the tax office's decision is truly justified. The entire situation is another example of how complex the Polish tax system is and how easily ordinary citizens can fall victim to changes in legal interpretations.